My name is Peter Günther Stern, which is a Germanic name. My brother's name is Samuel. He was born in 1939. I was born in 1936. The Nuremberg laws were passed in 1935, and those laws restricted Jews to non-citizenship. I lived in Nuremberg with my parents, who lived in a Jew house. My father, who had been an auto mechanic, had lost his business, and he was teaching in the Jewish school. And in November 1941, we were deported to Latvia, to the Riga area. There were 520 Jews deported from Nuremberg, and at the end of the war, there were 17 who survived. Of those 17, my brother, mother, and I were among them. We were deported to a place called Jungfernhof. It was people being pushed into what had been abandoned barns, crammed into areas that had no heat, light. We were then deported to the ghetto in Riga. The Nazis were aware that they were bringing Jews in from Germany, and in order to make room for them, they took 20,000 Latvian and Lithuanian Jews, marched them 7 miles to the other side of Riga, where there's a forest called Rambula. They had dug trenches, and they shot those 20,000 people over a 3-day period. We were then sent to an area in Russia. My father would fix German army vehicles. There were soldiers, but they weren't there in the sense of guarding. The rule was that if anyone tried to escape, my brother and I would be shot. My father and some of the boys were taken into Russia itself to fix an electrical installation. While there, they were attacked by Soviet forces, and my father saved the life of a German officer. January 1943, the Germans lost the Battle of Stalingrad, and the war was really over after that. They sent the boys back to the ghetto. Some of them were killed. We, my family, was put into the men's civil prison in Riga. My mother never left that cell, which was dark, carvings all over the wall. Prisoners had put their names, and was one of the first times that I've seen my parents scared. What did happen was we were put onto trucks, large pickup trucks, which were loaded with clothing that was being sent back to Germany. And we were smuggled back to Germany. I believe that the German officer that my father saved was responsible for smuggling us back into Germany for a better chance at life. When we got to what I believe was Berlin, the next thing I remember is being in court and a judge yelling at my parents, and then my father asking for permission to hug my brother and me. And he was sent to Buchenwald, where he died in May of that year, 1944. And we were sent to Ravensbrück with my mother, which was the only women's concentration camp. The people who were there were political prisoners. They wore a red triangle. homosexual, a pink triangle, Jews, a yellow triangle, criminals, I believe, were purple, the Roma were black. In this camp, my mother would work. Probably the biggest factories were clothing. They would make the prisoners' uniforms. As a matter of fact, the fur coats that were sent from various areas where people were killed were used for lining in officers' coats. We were in the Ravensbrück in deteriorating conditions until February of 1945. At that point, we were put on a cattle car and traveled to Bergen-Belsen. People were killed in all the camps. Ravensbrück was more of a death camp. They had installed a gas chamber and a crematorium. But it's hardly ever mentioned because there may have only been about 20,000 people killed in that way in Ravensbrück. And when you think of 11 million people killed in the Holocaust, what's 20,000? Bergen-Belsen, the people were killed because they weren't fed, they were overworked. We talk about 6 million Jews, but there were 5 million who weren't Jewish. Those people were killed as well. I hate the aspect of being involved in a numbers game, but we're talking about 11 million people murdered. We're not even talking about the 30 million soldiers all over the world that died. In April 1945, the British rescued Bergen-Belsen. At that point, 3 or 4 days before the British arrived, there was complete lack of any food or anything being delivered. People just dying of lack of water. And then when the English came, that didn't quite help either, because those soldiers, seeing all that death and hunger and starvation, started to share their field rations. And the richness of a field ration was poison to the body of all those people. By the end of the summer, we got on a truck and went back to Nuremberg. After about a year, we went to Munich to a displaced persons camp. And in February 1947, we came to the States. We were met by my mother's 2 brothers, one of whom at age 17 had come to the States in 1933, and the other got out with a visa to England the day before the war started. When we arrived, my mother went to work as a live-in maid, and during that summer she married a man who came back with us. At the end of high school, I got admitted to the Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy and got a degree in metallurgical engineering. Got myself certified as a teacher. Came back to New York, married, had 2 sons, spent 30 years teaching middle school science, and had a ball. At the end of my talks, I asked them to think about why I speak, or why any of us speak. And they will come up with many different reasons. In my way, I'm trying to prevent this from happening. And then I say, here's the other question. What are you doing about that? You have to have empathy. Essentially, if you want to live a life that has meaning for yourself, you can't get too obsessed with despair or hate. You have to look for the positive as much as you can. I have watched my legacy. I have seen my children and my grandchildren and my brother's children and grandchildren, and they are living a responsible life. That's all legacy that I could hope for.